Welcome back, Play on Canada podcast. Kevin Lowe is one of the most respected individuals in hockey, and here's why. 7-time NHL All-Star, 6-time Stanley Cup champion. He's won the King Vance Memorial Trophy, and so much more. But recently, he joined the Play On community in their board of directors. So welcome, Kevin. Thank you for doing this.
Hey, my pleasure. Looking forward to talking about street hockey.
Yes.
Awesome. So one thing that really jumps at me right off the bat, Kevin, is when we look at your extensive resume from playing in the NHL, a first-round pick, a world champion, and the general manager. What made you want to join Play On? Accomplish so much where you just feel like you still have more to give to the hockey community?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I was approached by Scott Hill initially, and when I listened to him speak, first of all, he's so passionate. He's done so much for Play On, committed a big amount of his life because it's such a good. Well, the concept's good. It's just it's a great initiative. And as we were talking initially, it occurred to me, how much I loved street hockey as a kid. I mean, we used to call it ball hockey. And I played tons. I played it all the time. And in my days since I stopped playing in the NHL, I've played very little hockey, mainly because I got right into coaching and then into management and then, in becoming an executive. And so I really didn't have much time to play. And any of the times that I did get on the ice, just even if I wasn't playing shinny or anything, I was just on the ice by myself with a puck and a stick. I realized that how much I enjoyed that experience. And I was thinking back as I would, as far as the street hockey thing's concerned, I would, as a kid, even if we didn't have anybody to play against, I'd have a net and a ball and I would stay out there for hours. Of course, it was that much better if you had a bunch of buddies and you could get a game going. But so it all sort of came back to me. I guess lastly, why I thought Play On was so important is that, the face of Canada has changed in the last couple decades. The country continues to grow, but the numbers in hockey don't grow. And that's largely to do with a lot of Canada's population are new Canadians. And they don't really know about the game. They need to be given an opportunity to get a sense of the game, and certainly street hockey is the cheapest way to do it. So I think if I put my NHL hat on or my ice hockey hat, I'm thinking that more emphasis on street hockey. It's really a Canadian thing, and if we can get a lot of new Canadians playing, that hopefully that goes a long way to get more participants on ice hockey.
Kevin, so since you joined the board of directors, tell our audience what is the board of directors and some of the tasks that you're going to lead.
Yeah, well, right now, of course, Play On had been successful, had great support from Hockey Night in Canada and CBC for a lot of years, and then, but unfortunately, some of the funding disappeared. So, really, at this stage, we're Play On needs some funding, and we've been working with all types of all levels of government across the country. There's a diverse group of directors on the board of Play On, and we're knocking on doors and trying to get convince people that Play On is it's not really just a hockey product. It's bringing Canadians together. It's a participation thing for people that remember that phrase. And it's a really healthy thing, and it's a community builder. There's so many aspects or angles of the event Play On that makes it enticing for everyone. So we're confident that we'll get things launched again in 2022. We'd hope to get it going again in 21, but with the pandemic still, all the uncertainty, it was really hard for companies and the government to commit on it. But we'll be spending the winter hounding them. We have a lot of very supportive politicians that are stepping up because they recognize on the athleticism side, on the participation side, getting Canadians out doing things. That's going to be front and center for the government as well. Particularly when we roll into next spring.
Yeah, I can't help but notice how you talked about just boiling it down to just how fun it was being able to just rifle a ball into a net, and even better with your friends. It reminds me of our last interview with Brian Sproul, who was a Red Wings second round pick a couple of years ago, and he talked about how hockey, it's his job, it's his lifestyle, and this tournament almost brought him back to a kid again. How it was just, you're just out there for fun, and you're enjoying the day. So I'm wondering if that's the same effect you have if you were to grab a stick and ball right now. Do you just step back from the work and just enjoy the sport for what it is?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got one repaired hip and one on the verge of being repaired, so I wouldn't be as mobile as I was. I'd like to think that I was a decent ice hockey player, but I was even better ball hockey player. I hated to lose, and played a ton of it. But yeah, I really hope by this time next year in 2022, I'm expecting to have my hip replaced in a couple months, and then I'll be all healed up and ready to go, and really be able to get into it. I could use a little weight, lose a little weight, mind you, but yeah, it brings back the memories of, and I've said this to people as well. Like, people don't realize, at least for me, how much street hockey meant for me to become an NHL player. In those days, I'm talking about the '60s. We didn't have nearly as much ice as kids have nowadays. So any of the stuff, and we didn't have all the specialized training, all the stick handling, and all the stuff that the kids do nowadays. We just played street hockey, and so I credit street hockey, getting me to the Hockey Hall of Fame.
So we could pencil you in for a couple of point shots then, a couple of rockets from the point, or
yeah. I was I obviously a tenacious defender, but I could step up and make a play, and yeah, I had now they use street hockey balls, but in our days we used old tennis balls, right? And so you had to hit them just right to really rifle a tennis ball off the pavement, and without shooting a bunch of rocks and stuff at the opponents at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I know Scott broke it down. There's an actual science to the ball he picked to make sure it was fluid, like it was very mobile enough, but still not overly bouncy. Definitely a good question, and you could hear that the whole science behind the ball in our first podcast with Scott Hill. But yeah, that's it certainly is. I can't wait to get out there myself, just to go out and play. And I don't think it'd be too hard to cover Scott out in the celeb game. Apparently, he's quite the cherry picker.
Yeah, the ball. The ball is critical too, right? I mean, it came a long way. Like I say, in our day, it was just once the fuzz got off a tennis ball, that was the ideal ball, right? But yeah, I know it's. I'm looking forward to it, and I've got a grandson now who just turned 1 today, actually. So looking forward to be able to pass the ball around with him in the not too distant future.
If you had to pick anyone to play with, Kevin, who would you pick to play on your team?
God, that's
except for me, Kevin. You don't need to pick me just because I'm here. All right, so.
Oh, I think of some of my old buddies growing up. Man, they were good. They were good ball hockey players. But I never really played ball hockey with my teammates in our NHL days. Not that I can remember. I think we might have played a couple floor hockey games, for promotional stuff or for charity or whatever. But I think the last organized ball hockey I would have played in a league in Hawkesbury, Ontario, in about 1977 or 78 or something. I mean, I've played a little bit since, but and who would I pick? I mean, I'd probably take Connor McDavid because he's played in the tournament, right? He's
Right.
played in play on, and
I think he
although
knows what he's doing too. You know.
yeah, yeah.
He's
Although
pretty
I mean,
good.
if it's if it's for the old guys, I might take Theo Fleury, and Theo was on the podcast and big supporter of Play On as well, and so I might pick a guy like Theo Fleury.
And Kevin, I know you mentioned already about how playing street hockey really made you that jump to the NHL. I just want to know if you had any influences that kind of helped you get into the sport, whether it was your dad or just that's where all your friends were doing. What was that like?
Yeah, our family, no question, my family. My dad was a big influence. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 13. But by then, I had all the proper um, guidelines, or the seeds were set, I guess. Our family was a big hockey family in the town of Lachute. My dad and his brothers created the first, along with the Lions Club, the first public skating rink was outdoors. That's where I learned to skate when I was about 3 years old, and then by the time I was 6, the first indoor rink. So called that would be about 1965 in Lachute, and my dad and his family were a big influence on that. I'm my generation is about 35 kids, and I'm the third youngest. And most of the boys, just about all the boys, played. I had one cousin that was actually played some NHL games. Another cousin that was drafted. Another cousin that was really good. Unfortunately, had bad knees, and we were a good hockey family. So I was around it my whole life, and I just moved along. I mean, I just been playing. So after Pee Wee is Bantam, and after Bantam is Midget, and after Midget is Junior, and after Junior is the NHL. I mean, that's just the way it worked for me. It wasn't no secret sauce there. I just loved doing what I was doing, and I was fortunate to be able to make the climb.
I read, Kevin, an article about you today about advice that your dad gave you. The two pieces of advice your dad gave you before kind of playing hockey. I wanted to ask you, what was that advice?
Oh God, that would be. There's so many. I mean, the one thing I remember about my dad was when I was coming home from a game. I might have been 10 or 11, and he had a. I guess I hadn't worked as hard that particular game, and so we had a man-to-man conversation. But he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, if you want to, you can play in the NHL. And that's, like, I'll never forget that. I didn't take it as gospel, but in hindsight, when I think back to it, I think that, he must have known. I mean, I was never the best kid around, like the best player, but I was always in the top of the top kids on every team I played on. And whether it was just my overall drive and love for the game, and the hate to lose part, that he saw all the elements that maybe gave me an opportunity. But really, I got my toughness and my hard work from my dad, but also respect of my teammates. I grew up in a bilingual part of the province of Quebec, and but there are many more French people than English, and I didn't speak a ton of French, but I learned it. And he made, he encouraged me to learn it so that I could communicate with my teammates, and just really push the boundaries for me to get out of my comfort zone, and really get on an opportunity to grow to where I eventually got to.
So, did it ever hit you at one point that you'd be an NHL player, or did you kind of, when you were growing up, did you kind of believe that you were going to be one, or was it kind of you never looked that far ahead?
Yeah, no, it different era, right? Completely different era. Like, not, nowadays kids are identified at, when they're teenagers, right? Not the, some of them are, right? The Connor McDavids and the Crosbys, and but if you're, I was drafted. I was drafted in the first round by the Quebec Ramparts. Didn't even know I got drafted. A friend of mine phoned me and said he was reading the newspaper and saw I got drafted. How weird is that?
Yeah, what a way to find out.
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't like I was, the 200th pick. I was in the first round of the Quebec Junior League draft. Quebec was a pretty good team, and I didn't even know if I can't even remember if I knew that there was a draft. But then after my second year junior, the WHA were trying to sign some players, and it all of a sudden the word it was read in the newspaper that the Birmingham Bulls were looking to sign me, and so that was really the first glimpse of, I would have been 18 years old, and the first glimpse of, hey, maybe I do have a chance, and had to look into getting an agent, when you might be too young to remember, but in 1978, 79, the baby Bulls, Craig Hartsburg and Rob Ramage and Ricky Vive, and I'm trying to think who else, Pat Riggin. There was a bunch of guys that signed out of junior, so they left junior a year early and played for Birmingham because they could. And I was offered the same contract, but my family really didn't want me to go, so I stayed and played my last year junior in Quebec City, and then of course reading hockey news and saw that I was identified as a potential. Well, at one point they had me rated as 4th overall. But I was always expected to be sort of a top 10 pick in my draft year, 79, 80. But then, long story short, the WHA folded. They brought those 4 teams, the Oilers, the Jets, the Whalers, and the Nordiques into the league. And then they made 2 draft years in 1 year. So because of guys like Ray Bourque and Tom McCarthy, and there was a bunch of underage guys that got drafted in my draft year. So that pushed a bunch of us down, and I went all the way to the last pick in the first round, which was happened to be the Oilers, and didn't even know Edmonton was in the NHL, and had never been further west than London, Ontario. But after 3 days at training camp, a guy by the name of Wayne Gretzky skated up beside me and said, and of course I had met Wayne already by then, but we're warming up before practice, and he said, "Hey, maybe you and I should become roommates in a room together and stuff." And I said, "I don't even know if I'm going to make the team." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, you're going to make the team." And the rest was history.
Certainly not missing a Sunday morning paper, that's for sure.
And Kevin, you the journey, so young with the Oilers, and then you grew up within the organization, and there's some amazing teams that came out of that. And yourself, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Paul Coffey, the list goes on with great players. What was that dynamic like? And you talked about teamwork from a few moments ago. What was that teamwork dynamic like with that all-star group?
Yeah, we were fortunate. I mean, I'd say that you're talking about some of the greatest players of all time. Certainly when you speak of Wayne and Mark, and throw Paul in, and then add Curry, Anderson, and Fuhr. Those guys are Hall of Famers and super talented. So the talent was there. All really good people. We're all still good friends to this day. But we were really fortunate to have fantastic leadership when we got there as young players, and I like that we had character and we were quality people already, but boy, it means a lot when you have great leadership, and that really set the seeds for us after a few years of being around those guys and watching them and listening to them, and then shortly after the team started to have success, of course, Wayne made it much easier for a lot of us to transition to that level of greatness because, he took a lot of the attention away from all of us. So it allowed us to, the expectations were on him. They were really never on us until we became a good team. And then the expectations were on the team. There was never any jealousies. Wayne and Mark, for that matter, were just great people and great teammates. So it became, I guess for us, it became Camelot. But we enjoyed the ride. We loved to play. We hated to lose. We loved the win. We quickly equated with winning, fun, losing, bad, sad. So, it was like it's Pavlov's theory, right? So, we committed ourselves, and that's another thing I'd say about the group is that, and I'm not saying that players don't, in recent decades or whatever, but winning the cup every year was our expectation. I imagine most NHL players set that as an expectation or a hope. But for us, it was, super disappointing if we didn't win. So we committed ourselves, on the ice, off the ice, away from the game. I mean, we had our fun. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, there was no fun unless we were winning. So that was always the most important thing.
Did you know back then that this was going to be a special group that's going to get talked about for like the rest of hockey time?
No, certainly not in the early years. As the further we went on and we started, we started winning cups. But even then, we're coming on the heels of the Montreal Canadiens winning 5 in a row, the New York Islanders winning 4 in a row. So, you knew that even if you won 3 cups, it's like, well, you're still not a great team, right? You got to get to 4 or 5 if you're going to match up with the greatest of all time. So that took a long time. But maybe the difference is Wayne setting all those records and Paul setting all those records, and we were an entertaining team to watch. I think, even for our biggest critics and the people that didn't like the Oilers because they had another favorite team. If you gave them truth serum, they'd say, they enjoyed watching the Oilers because we played a high tempo game, and we changed the game in the '80s, right? Came from the Flyers and the Bruins of the '70s. The Montreal Canadiens could do it both ways. The Islanders were a heavier team, but they were an entertaining team. The game was starting to change, and then of course the Oilers took it to another level. So, it's arguable. We were voted as the '85 team was voted as the greatest team of all time in the NHL's 100th anniversary. I'm sure there's Montreal Canadiens that disagree with that selection, and I'm sure there's Islanders that disagree with that selection. But it is what it is. They we'll never know. But we had a lot of respect for those great Montreal Canadiens teams, and particularly the Islander teams, because they're the ones that we had to knock off to sort of give ourselves a chance to get the mantle.
Kevin, one more for me about your days of playing in the NHL. How did the group stay motivated to win those cups every year? Because many teams, once they win, you kind of take a step back. But with yourself and the group, it was a consistent, couple few years of winning.
Yeah, I think I'd say, as I mentioned earlier, we just loved the win. And as a kid, I was hardwired. I had a terrible temper if I lost, and I would say a lot of those players had the similar mentality. We expected to win, not in a take it for granted way, but just we expected ourselves to do the job to win. I don't know what else to say really. I jokingly said it, but it's true. You learn, like in the NHL. Mike Keenan had a saying. There's two things in hockey. There's winning, and then there's misery. And he's right. If it, once you set the bar, once you're considered a winner and win a cup, if you don't win the next year, you're a failure. People don't call you a failure, but you consider yourself, it's a failed season. So you learn, you learn the recipe. We had some hard lessons, losing in '82 the Los Angeles Kings, getting swept by the Islanders in '83. So, that really, then once we got the secret sauce, or once we dialed into the recipe, then you hang on to that, and we were young enough. And of course, at that stage, we're winning cups when we're quite young. So there was no reason why he couldn't win a bunch more. It would be, at the end of the day, I always said, listen, a lot of series were hard. There were, 1990 against the Jets down 3-1. The Flames always played us tough. The Jets always played us tough. Chicago Blackhawks in the semifinals a few times. But I always felt that if we played to our expectation and played, within the system that the coaches put together, that in a 7-game series we weren't going to lose, and that's the way it turned out a lot of years.
Yeah, I think that really just boils down to your statement about how winning was just so much better, and like losing, you almost hate it more than you like to win. That kind of mindset. But I know a question that I often hear from guys that have won multiple cups. Do you have a favorite cup win, or are they all the same, or like is there something like a celebration that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, the first is, of course, is the one that's most cherished, I guess, because you think back. We were talking about street hockey. I'm sitting on the bench in May 19th, 1984, at North Plains College, and as the final seconds are down, I'm thinking to myself, this is surreal. Within minutes, I'm going to get to touch the Stanley Cup. Every street hockey game, road hockey game I ever played, it was always for the Stanley Cup. You're playing for the cup, and particularly in the springtime when we'd go in and watch the Canadians play, and then in between periods run out and play street hockey, and then go back in and come back out. And so that the '84 Cup, the first one that the Oilers won, that I won, sticks out. And then I'd say probably the '94 Cup with the Rangers, because that was with another group of guys that had played for the Oilers, particularly Mark Messier, Craig McTavish, Tikkanen, Bukaboom, Adam Graves. The Rangers hadn't won a cup in 54 years. The Leafs are going through that now, and kind of shocking when you think about it. Like the first game I played with the Rangers on Long Island, the fans were chanting, and I didn't understand what they're chanting. And I asked one of the guys on the bench, and they were chanting 1940, because that's the last time the Rangers had won the cup. So there was a lot of exercising demons. Remember, there was over 1 million people at the parade going down the avenue of the Champions, I think it's called, on the floats. And remember seeing at a street corner, there was a little guy and another older person, clearly his dad, and then another older person was his grandfather. They had a sign, "I thank you, my dad thanks you, and my grandfather thanks you," for when it bring the cup back to New York. So that was pretty special.
That must have been amazing to see. Taking a little bit of a turn, Kevin, because we want to ask you about management. So my understanding is that you went from the Rangers, got traded back to Edmonton to finish your career, and then you retire, and then you end up being an assistant coach. How was that transition like, become from a player to an assistant coach?
Yeah, by then I'd played almost 20 years in the league. When I was 39 years old. Um, as an older player, you almost become a quasi coach. Even though you don't get the title, coaches lean on the older guys from time to time, and get their thoughts, and your mind starts getting in that mode when you realize, boy, I don't have a lot of playing days left. What am I going to do? I always said I wanted to stay in hockey if it wasn't directly in coaching or scouting, or it'd be indirectly and on the media side, because I'd done a fair amount of media work in Edmonton in the off seasons, etc. So when I made my decision to come back to Edmonton to play one more year, the Oilers they had some good young players, and Glenn Sather was looking for some veteran leadership, and he asked me to come back, and I said, well, I've got another option. There's one other team offering me a chance to play for another year and then be involved in the organization. And what can you do? And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd like to get into coaching. And he said, fine. He said, all right, we'll sign you for 1 year to play and 2 years as an assistant coach. You can't sign those deals anymore. There's a standard players contract that you can't add those things in. So I was pretty fortunate. I came back and the year went well. The Oilers made the playoffs. They hadn't made the playoffs in 4 years, and they made it again. So I decided to delay my coaching and played for another year, and then transitioned into an assistant coach. And I enjoyed that. I worked with Ron Lowe and Ted Green, and was just figuring that I'd be assistant coach for a bunch of years, and would have enjoyed that. But Glenn Sather wanted to make a coaching change the very next year, and I became head coach. I was fortunate. Craig McTavish was an assistant with the Rangers, and he was ready to be a top coach. So I was able to get Craig to come to Edmonton with me and help out, and then of course Charlie Huddy as well, my old teammate who had been doing some coaching. So I only was a head coach for a year, and then I went on to be a general manager. I was getting fast tracked right out of the league, but fortunate that I got the opportunities and had a lot of fun doing it. Playing's the most fun. I enjoyed the coaching part and the managing part, but no question, being a player is, if you had to pick one of the jobs, being a player is the most fun.
It's so cool how you got to experience all this. I just have one more question to your playing days. Playing all those years for the Oilers and only for the Rangers for a brief stint. How weird was that, just to throw on a different colored jersey for the first time?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I got traded. I was without a contract. I'd played 13 years. So players are free agents, unrestricted free agents after 7 years. Now, I had played 13 years, and I wasn't an unrestricted free agent. Different era. Talk about lack of player rights. So I made a decision that it was time to move on. And Glenn Sather wasn't too keen on trading me, so I didn't get traded till December. So I was out of hockey for from the spring till I think we lost the previous spring to the Chicago Blackhawks, if I remember correctly. And didn't play again till December when I got to New York. So it was weird. It didn't. I didn't have a great year, and I really. Experience-wise, recognize now when players, particularly older players, get traded to new organizations, it takes an adjustment period. It takes some adjustment, and of course that season ended. The Rangers didn't make the playoffs, and then the next year we won the President's Cup and went all the way to Game 7 and win the Stanley Cup. So it was great. I love by then I'd settled in. I loved playing for the Rangers, great organization. I loved living in New York City. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I experienced playing and working for another organization. I was ready to, come back home to Edmonton.
So, continuing on with your management skills there, how different was it from instead of like watching the games and not being able to hop over the boards and try to make something about it, and just watching, kind of observing, and then working that way with players?
Yeah, I enjoyed the strategy part on the coaching side. Trying to, we were always given the strategy by the coaches. Now it's your turn to come up with a new twist if things aren't going well, a new breakout. And I enjoyed mostly most of the 5-on-5 and the penalty kill stuff for me, and Craig McTavish did a lot of the power play stuff. I was never a power play guy, so I was happy to delve that off to someone else. But yeah, and it was just good to see. All I asked was simple. My philosophy was simple: is play as a team, come to work, and we always had, especially in those '90s or late '90s, early 2000s. The Oilers had really a good. They had a lot of blue collar players, so we didn't win as many in those days. We're playing against Colorado, Detroit, particularly in our conference. Big payrolls. I think at one point we were about 25 million, and those teams were up in the 75, 80, 85. The Rangers are $95 million. So it was, you felt like you had one hand tied behind your back, but at the end of the day, you got the right players that we had. We made it tough on the opposition. We had legendary games against the Dallas Stars in the playoffs. Played them 6 or 7 years or something, and they were a big payroll team, top team to eventually won a cup, but they never loved playing our team. And I enjoyed being a coach on that team, and then enjoyed being a manager of that team for a bunch of years. It was fun to see. Disappointing not to be able to win, but certainly realistic that unfortunately we were never involved in free agency, and so we couldn't bring in kind of the marquee players to be the difference makers.
Speaking about management, Kevin, I read today that between 2000 and 2008, in your time as GM, the Oilers had the 13th most wins in the NHL, and that was from OilersNation.com. Obviously, many Canadians remember the 2006 Stanley Cup Finals. A difficult ending to that, but what was that experience like?
Oh, that was amazing. We'd made the trade for Chris Pronger and Michael Pekka. It was coming out of the lockout year. He had was off for an entire year in the 04-05 season, and so we came back. We knew we had a lot of good players, hard working, smart players, and adding particularly Pronger, Chris Pronger, really gave us a step up. But all that season, we were in every game, but we didn't seem to be getting. There was less emphasis on the. There wasn't as many metrics to identify where your gaps would be in your organization or your team for that matter, as they have today, that might have identified that. But just with our eyes, we'd see that we had a saying in the dressing room, in the coach's room after the game. That if you're wondering whether a goalie should he have made that save, did he kind of snuck through? What do you think? Was that a bad goal or not? And it was Craig McTavish that actually said, if you have to ask the question, you know the answer. And so we decided to go out and get a goalie, and we got Dwayne Rolson, and that was predicated on save percentage. There was a handful of goalies that we identified, and Roley had always had a good save percentage. So nowadays, as far as analytics are concerned, that's a pretty obvious one, but it wasn't really identified back then. And he just fit in with us like a glove, and we went on a magical run. There was one one person that had actually said going into the playoffs that year that from an analytics standpoint, analytics was just beginning, that the best team in the conference was the Detroit Red Wings, and who the Oilers happened to be playing in the first round. But he had said that if the Oilers happened to beat the Red Wings, that they would go to the Stanley Cup Finals, which is kind of amazing that this person had predicted that. But it just goes to show you how important goaltending is. As one of the late great coaches said, goaltending, it's everything, right? It's 80% if you have it, and it's 100% if you don't have it. So that was a fun run. It's a shame that Dwayne Rolson got hurt. I mean, UC Markkanen played well, but Rolson, we were just on such a roll, winning 3-0 in that first game, and then he got injured, and we lose crazily. And then, we took it to 7. It was a good run. I felt bad for the players, particularly because none of them on the team had won a cup. So that's as close. 99% of them. Chris Pronger went on to win. I'm not sure who else of that group might have won on to win, but not many.
Yeah, I still remember watching that series. So many great players. I remember the Oilers players in their home games skating out underneath that oil rig or whatnot at the home games. Fernando Pizzani is.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Ryan Smith was another guy on that team, I believe. Yeah, so that was a great series to watch. A question about so you've been around the game for decades. You really grew with the sport. How much has really changed in your perspective from just the game overall, from when you started in the NHL to where you are today?
Yeah, the game. I mean, I love watching the game. I mean, it's still hockey. I mean, the rules have changed things. I was part of the competition committee in 04-05 in that lockout year. The game had really stagnated. There was a lot of hooking and holding, so made a lot of changes in the rules that sped up the game. What's changed? I mean, the training, as I talked about, the kids are training at such a young age, so they're bigger and faster and stronger, all relatively speaking for this era. The speed of the game, it's a puck possession game now. Now you don't want to dump it in unless you have to. You don't want to transport it. You got to hang on to the puck because it's tough to get it back. It's not as crazy as the 80s with the head hunting and the stick work and stuff, but I wouldn't say it's any less physical because the emphasis on puck control and puck possession. So when you're an offensive player hanging on the puck and cycling it down in the corners, you're taking a terrible pounding on yourself to maintain possession and the battles for the puck. The strength of the players fighting for the puck. It's a very physical game, just in a different way. So, and of course, much more media attention, social media, and the advent of the internet and networks and so on. The game gets so much more exposure. So, I mean, we could get him in Los Angeles on a Tuesday night, and the rest of the country didn't know, so you could make a mistake. But of course, if you whiff on one, if you're the goal nowadays, or you do something, I mean, the entire hockey world knows about it within a nanosecond. Let alone in our days, they might not ever find out about it. So, a lot of different things, but I think the game's in a great place. it's still exciting to watch, and it's growing worldwide. So that's a good thing.
A final question for you, Kevin, because we mentioned Scott Hill, and he often asks this question: what does street hockey mean to Canadians, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, for my generation, it means so much. It's what we did. You know, this is pre phones, tablets, etc. Completely different era. I'm fearful that people are missing the opportunity. Kids, primarily kids, I think of, are missing the opportunity to get out and play the sport because of what's going on. So that's what I like about Play On. You know, it brings much more awareness about it. But it's such it's such an inexpensive thing. You need a hockey stick and a ball, couple nets. In our day, we didn't even have nets. We put clumps of snow on the side or do whatever we could. Some people made homemade nets, and you could entertain yourself for hours. Literally hours. I don't. I'm sure our American friends and our Scandinavian friends might be saying, well, no, they're playing street hockey, as early as Canadians. But I just got to think that it's a Canadian thing. It's another one of those things that we can be proud of. That we are certainly, if we weren't the first, we're one of the first, and there's not a ton that we have really to be able to say that about. So I just hope that with Play On we can keep it fresh and top of mind for Canadians, we're keeping people out in the open or outdoors, or I guess you can play street hockey indoors as well, but keeping them healthy more than anything, and having fun in a good Canadian thing.
Awesome.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for doing this. We appreciate you having you on the podcast, and I know being on the podcast is probably right up there with you with all these teen hockey memories.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad. Say hi to Zach.
Yeah, I will.
Said hi, and hope. Well, I'm sure we'll connect with you guys one of these days in the real world and not the virtual world. But
Kevin, come back anytime you want. Anytime you want. You're always welcome here on the podcast. To wrap this up, here at Play On, we're building Canada with one game at a time. And when you have people like Kevin Lowe on the Play On Canada board, life is pretty good.